Today we're on the Isaac Morley farm, just on the outskirts of Kirtland, Ohio. Isaac Morley was an early convert to the church in Kirtland. Amazing guy, veteran of the War of 1812, very successful farmer, and a very sincere Christian. And Isaac, after he studied the New Testament and the Book of Mormon, really kind of fixes on the promises made in there that the disciples had all things in common, that there was a way for the disciples to share what they possessed so that there were no poor among them, and he sees this as an important function. So one of the things that Isaac Morley does is he invites 50 or 60 people to come and live on his farm, and there they make up what some locals refer to as the big family, where they have all things in common and they share goods so that there's no poor. Isaac Morley has the best of intentions, but really doesn't have any rules, and almost immediately it starts to cause problems. There's jealousy, people start getting upset over their things being taken. Somebody even walked off with someone's watch, and it's just not working out. And this is the situation when Joseph Smith and the other members of the church in New York start to gather here to Kirtland. The Lord told Joseph Smith and his associates that when they came to Kirtland, they would receive the law and be endowed with power from on high. The law is received shortly after, and that's going to be the focus of what we talk about today. The law is several laws, but at the heart of it is a set of instructions that form the core of what Latter-day Saints today call the Law of Consecration.
My name is Casey Griffiths, and I love learning about church history. Join me as we travel the world and explore the history of the Latter-day Saints. This is Restoration Revealed.
So here on the Morley farm, this isn't the original house, but it is about 100 years old, and missionaries live here. And what Isaac Morley had attempted to do was just live with all things in common without any real rules governing it. When Joseph Smith arrives in Kirtland, he receives section 42 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which has a section, verses 30 to 42, which is today known as the Law of Consecration. And the Law of Consecration wasn't just willy-nilly, you share everything that you have with me. The Law of Consecration had rules and structure. For instance, what would happen first is that an individual would go to the bishop, and in section 41, the first bishop, Edward Partridge is called, and they would consecrate all that they have to the church. So they'd basically sign a form listing what they had and giving all to the church. Then the bishop and the individual, the consecratee, would basically work out what they needed in order to take care of their family and their own personal needs. At this point, there was a deed of consecration given to the person that gave them their stewardship. And stewardship was an important principle. It wasn't that everything was owned by everybody. Once you received a stewardship, that was your property. Nobody else could come into your house and take your clothes or ride off on your horse because it was your stewardship and your job was to take care of it. After a person entered into the Law of Consecration, their businesses would continue. They just had consecrated what they had to the church. So Newell K. Whitney, for instance, was a businessman who owned the store. There was also sawmill and an ashery in Kirtland that were all used as consecrated industries to contribute to the Law of Consecration. So a new convert gathering to Kirtland could probably find a job here. He consecrated everything that he had to the local bishop, who was probably Newell K. Whitney, and then he'd get to work in one of these spaces producing labor that would help contribute to the community and allow him to provide for himself and also create funds that could assist other people as they continued to gather to Kirtland.
For the next part of my journey, I pursued an idea that led me to Springville, Utah.
So we've talked a little bit about consecration, what it looked like in Kirtland in the 1830s, but a major question that a lot of Latter-day Saints have is, do we still live the Law of Consecration? And if we do, what does it look like in our time frame? What does consecration look like? Because the church is different than it was in the 1830s. We don't do anything pretty much the same way, except for the vital ordinances of the church. And one of the great things about the church is its ability to adapt to different circumstances, different environments. So if we still live the Law of Consecration, what does it look like today? I decided to come to this chapel in Springville where I'm going to meet with one of the local bishops. You'll probably recognize him. We're going to have a little conversation about what his job is like and how he administers the law of consecration in our time. Bishop Jones.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
We're here to talk about the law of consecration. We want to talk to you a little bit about it and get your insights on it.
Okay.
Where's the best place to do this?
Let's come back to my office.
Let's go to your office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Come on in.
Okay.
Let's just, let's sit right here.
Where's good? Right here?
This is great.
Stephen, you've been serving as a bishop for a couple years.
Yeah.
Do we still live the law of consecration?
There's no question about that. Our responsibility, the covenant we make in the temple is to minister to others, right? Is to look after each other, to love God and love your neighbor. Those are the 10 commandments.
So somebody comes in and they say, hey, I'm struggling with depression. You get them to therapy.
That's right.
Somebody comes in and says, hey, I've got this sin that's weighing me down.
Exactly.
You deal with that. If somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm struggling, I might lose my house. You point them towards somebody that can help them budget to resources that will help them. You're kind of the coordinator of the whole thing.
That's right. But I think everyone, as a minister, is a huge part of helping when it comes to consecration and when it comes to welfare in the church.
Consecration involves time. It involves the gifts a person's been given. It can involve money, but it's more like consecration as a person looking at, hey, what do I have? What resources do I possess, and how do I use this to bless other people?
Everybody has something to consecrate. Everyone has something to offer. The thing that you think is not a big deal, to other people, it can fill a gap for them.
We had a lady in our ward who had mobility issues. She couldn't mow her lawn. She couldn't clean up her house. So the young men would go over and clean up the yard. The young woman would go in, and she had a lot of cats. So they'd help her clean up her house so that it was sanitary. You know?
If you look online and you hear all the stories of like the church has X amount of money, billions of this or that, well, how far does that go when you can think of we're trying to help the entire world?
Yeah, and for a bishop,
yeah,
it's the whole geographical area.
That's
everybody's bishop in this set area, which can be huge depending on how large the church is, or it can be small. Like you're probably a couple city blocks here in Springville.
That's not too much, yeah.
but
other places it's bigger, yeah.
But it's still a lot.
I think that what would be really cool is if I take you to a place where we can get like the big picture, because we talked about like the church is responsible for the world. Would you be down to go?
Yeah, let's go.
I made an appointment for a couple days from now, but I can show you some other things, but we can go check that out.
Okay.
Before I left Bishop Jones, he wanted to share a miraculous welfare experience he had the very first day he was called to serve as bishop.
Okay, so I come out here and I'm like, what is going on, right? And then it was the person that was over the facilities that's responsible for locking up the door. They're like, there's somebody right here. I mean, bless their heart, seriously. They were right here on a sleeping bag. And I was just like, oh, what do I do? Just not having any experience, literally less than 24 hours. And there's a place for me to direct that anyone, anywhere, member of the ward, they can get help.
Yeah, you found a way to help her.
I did. And I thought I was like, wow, I have know nothing about being a bishop. And right away, I can just look up online, it's like, there's resources, there's places for people to get help.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and your first day, I mean, you just kind of got pushed out of the nest, right?
They pushed out of the nest, like, figure it out, like, okay, let's see what we're gonna do, you know? So yeah, it was right there.
Amazing.
It's estimated that there are almost 32,000 congregations in the church worldwide. As Bishop Jones walked me back to my car, I realized that bishops and branch presidents are helping the poor and needy almost every day. Imagine the impact this small army has on God's children throughout the world. Speaking of global impact, Bishop Jones invited me to join him in downtown Salt Lake City at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Welfare Square facility. It's here we can discover how a few verses of Revelation received by Joseph Smith in 1831
are making a global impact today.
What are some things that people may not be aware of in places that the church actually helps?
We're actually involved all over the world. Last year, I think we did about $1.34 billion in humanitarian aid throughout the world.
Say that again?
About $1.34 billion in humanitarian aid.
Please note that our visit to Welfare Square was during 2024, and the humanitarian donations mentioned were for 2023. Since that time, the church has released an updated 2024 welfare report with donations totaling $1.45 billion in humanitarian aid. 192 countries and territories around the world received help. The first stop on our tour of Welfare Square is the Bishop's Storehouse. This resource center is used by bishops of the church to provide goods to needy individuals. The storehouses stock basic foods and essential household items.
As you look at these products, anything that you see that says Desireette Farms on it, we actually produce.
That's amazing.
And we're producing just about 50% of all of the products that we distribute in the United States. We buy our produce off the market every day. We grow our own potatoes and our own apples. All of the other produce we buy off the market. We have 8 different varieties of meat. We produce 4 of them. All of the dairy products that you see in the cooler, with the exception of eggs, are produced right here on site.
We need a cleanup on aisle 5. Cleanup on aisle 5. Thank you.
All of the lights in the warehouse and throughout the building are set so that if we're not working in that area for 10 or 15 minutes, they'll just shut themselves off.
To preserve the energy?
Yep.
One of the most important parts of the church's welfare program are the volunteers. In 2024, volunteers for the church donated 6.6 million hours at church welfare and self-reliance facilities in service missions and through church-sponsored community service projects.
I just wonder, like, if the whole world, if everybody equally, no matter what you made, paid 10%,
There wouldn't be a problem.
and if everybody fasted once a month and donated,
Well, if you look at what the church is able to do with that, in just 17 million out of, 8 billion people, that's amazing what the impact that the church can have worldwide.
yeah.
Our next stop on the tour is the Desireette Industries thrift store. Its welfare purpose holds a lot more than just finding bargains, as I'll soon find out.
Desireette Industries is one of those things that most members of the church don't really recognize why that's part of church welfare program. Desireette Industries is a secondhand thrift store.
Yeah.
Really. But that's not its purpose. We're developing people. And as you look, it looks just like a regular department store. Like I say, they're learning merchandising skills, they're learning work skills, they're learning how to be here on the job, on time, working a full day. Everything in welfare is to develop people, to help them to be self-reliant, to help them to gain the dignity or retain the dignity and self-worth that they have. When you donate things to the Desireette Industries, you're actually donating money into training programs and developing people.
Look at that. And it's only $30. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm getting it if you don't want
Should we
it.
do the rest of
If
the
you,
video?
hey,
Just be like,
if you don't want that, I'm gonna get it.
People say, well, why are there so many homeless people in Salt Lake if the church provides that service? And we just have to be here when they're ready. Because until a person is ready to make a change in their life, you can't do it for them. But we want to be there when they're ready.
Each one of these red dots represents one of the church's completed humanitarian projects in 2024. If you count each one, the total would be 3,836. The types of humanitarian projects the church is involved with cover a wide range of interests. There are projects that support women and children, emergency relief, clean water, education, employment, environmental stewardship, healthcare, mobility, feeding the hungry, housing,
mental health, and self-reliance.
Here at the dairy, you'll see we're going to see 3 different areas. The first area we'll be talking about is powdered products. During COVID, there were some challenges getting powdered milk, getting milk products into the New York area for the Jewish communities because you can only have kosher products. So we had the local rabbis come in and certify our certify our powdered milk process. And they recertify us every 6 months, making sure that we're meeting that requirement.
That's a lot of cheese. Look at that. How heavy is that block?
About 42 pounds. And you see that they trim these edge pieces off.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll put these in a bag, and we'll donate those to humanitarian organizations. They might be making toasted cheese sandwiches for the homeless people, or maybe even shredding it and putting it into recipes for the soup kitchens. Back here in the back, we have a butter churn, and on Fridays, all week long, they'll be skimming the milk off, the cream off the milk. So we don't do whole milk here. We just do 2% in the cream we use. And Fridays, we make butter.
Okay, this is the moment. This is the moment. Oh, you picked right. You picked well. Yeah, are they all chocolate?
Yeah, both of them are chocolate. If you go, we can do one on the left and one on the right.
I'll just get a taste. You ready for this?
This one goes in.
Is it churchy?
Oh, man.
If we do like it.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I had some of this.
I'm gonna help pass those out.
Yeah. That's good.
It's like ice cream in a cup.
In addition to the cheese slices and chocolate milk, the tour of Welfare Square was extremely informative. But did we discover the answer to our original question?
Well, what did you think?
Well, I loved it, and we got some good information and some chocolate milk. And so this has been a worthwhile day, and I'm full, first of all. But I want to come back to the question we really started this whole video with, which is, do we still live the law of consecration?
I think without a question. I've been here before, but the most eye-opening part for me is how it affects the entire world.
And I mean, in remembering the poor and the needy, which is that's the foundational law of consecration. We need to, I look at this picture and I think, hey, sometimes we're the person that's helping, and sometimes we're the person that's getting help. And it takes humility on both sides to do it. But man, if everybody would study about consecration, learn about consecration, and commit to live it, it'd be a lot different.
And they can. I think that's what, if there's anybody can know anything from this, they can know that it is possible to do today, right now. You can live the law of consecration today, whether you donate or not, right? Just to notice the people around you and give the best of yourself to them. You know, I think that's very, very important.
Well, thanks, Stephen.
Yeah. Hey.
This has been great.
Yeah.